the acquisition of these PPEs, and indeed all health commodities to ensure that we deliver value to our people. And I wanted to make those remarks because obviously there has been press reports about the prices that were there before for PPEs, the prices that were there for face masks. But I would like to say that anybody doing a little research will find that that indeed was the situation across the world at that time.
The COVID-19 probe found tenders allegedly going to politically connected figures. Government investigated amid public outcry on $2 billion aid received to combat COVID-19 being squandered.
Who is your godfather?
My name is James Chelule, and the person who transacted with KEMSA is still James Chelule. There is no godfather.
Health workers reported PPE shortage, risking lives, and some even died. KEMSA denied theft claims even though its top officials were involved. Investigation revealed misuse of $7.8 million for PPE. Laws were massively flouted in tender awards.
Yeah, we presented ourselves. Yes. And because our letter was addressed to the chief executive officer.
What were you carrying?
Sorry?
What were you carrying as you went there?
So we carried our letter.
Letter of introduction?
Letter of introduction.
EACC implicated officials and recommended prosecution. Second phase targeted beneficiary companies. But until today, 5 years later, no single person has been brought to justice. Join us as we remember together. This is the Daily Insight Africa. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, a $1 billion deal pertaining to COVID-19 in Kenya had captured the scrutiny of U.S. regulators, shining a spotlight on the transparency concerns surrounding Kenya's procurement procedures, particularly in times of emergencies. Across the African continent, the pandemic had unveiled instances of corruption within various governments. South Africa faced allegations of fund mismanagement, while Uganda encountered inflated prices for relief efforts. Within Kenya, a wave of protests erupted, fueled by allegations of corruption in the acquisition and distribution of $71.96 million worth of COVID-19 equipment by a government agency.
To be having some people outside this room that are more important to you than this committee.
You were trying to do business worth $4 billion and you're literally struggling to remember where your bank accounts are held?
Because there was a number of bank accounts.
Okay, let's start with all of them. You want to take some water and try and remember?
That you can go down with them if you wish. But you can also have an opportunity to redeem yourselves. But if you are together with those people outside this room, then you will go down with them.
Global stage when it came to light that the Kenyan government had entered into a $1 billion contract with a Canadian company named Callo, aimed at constructing mobile clinics and upgrading hospitals to combat COVID-19. Callo disclosed this partnership in an annual report filed with the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, SEC, resulting in the suspension of trading in Callo's shares due to doubts about the accuracy of the provided information, the veracity of statements within regulatory filings encompassing agreements related to healthcare infrastructure ventures across several African nations fell under intense scrutiny. Even though Kenya's finance minister disavowed any contract with Callo, the lack of transparency in Kenya's procurement processes during emergencies emerged as a pressing concern. Sheila Masinde, the executive director of Transparency International. Kenya advocated for an open contracting system that would empower citizens to monitor information.
This was now undue influence. You are instructed that instead of quoting 3,183, we want you to quote a value of 95 shillings per piece at 50. When there are 50 pieces in total, that's 4,750. So which means that you are influenced to quote that value so that some people could get their cut.
The fact that you sat down with 3 individuals and agreed to shoot prices from 490,000 to 135 million verbally, that in itself says a lot.
Honorable Chair,
kindly note, it was not verbally because I had gone with my letter.
You
Please
went
note
with
that.
one letter,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
And they replied to you that go ahead and supply verbally.
Yeah, and this shows that after even they said that
implement
it was
specific
it was
regulations
documented.
for emergency procurement. Kenya's existing procurement portal suffered from delays and information gaps, with numerous government entities neglecting to publish their procurement details there.
We presented ourselves,
Yes.
and because our letter was addressed to the chief executive
What were
officer.
you carrying?
Sorry.
What were you carrying as you went there?
So we carried our letter.
Letter of introduction?
Letter
President
of introduction
Uhuru
and
Kenyatta
intent.
kick-started endeavors to make procurement data accessible online, but progress remained sluggish. Suggestions were made for establishing rules regarding urgent need procurement to ensure transparency and accountability.
Less than 24 hours, your samples to be approved without even you being technically, financially evaluated, being told that you have to supply 200,000 pieces. Without anything else, went and requested for an extension. You got an extension to be able to supply. You supply these items. Immediately after you finish supplying these items, you invoice, and in less than around 30 days, your payment has been cleared.
I would say those were not normal or usual circumstances.
All right, but I'll tell you this.
When I remember the mood.
This
even
controversy
in the country,
underscored the hazards associated with procurement in times of crisis, not only within Kenya, but on a global scale. Even affluent nations like the UK and Germany encountered transparency challenges in emergency procurement. In Kenya, where concerns regarding debt and corruption persist, this issue assumed particular. The question still remains. What happened to EACC on investigating the $7.8 million meant for PPEs? Why weren't the KEMSA officials not brought to justice? Was that Senate committee covering up for their corrupt friends in the name of leaders? Why were the tenders given to companies that had no reputation in supplying health equipment?
Majority of Kenyans cannot afford to be alive. We are aware that to date, the government has received billions from external partners, reallocated and appropriated billions from the last budget, including through supplementary budgets, allocated more billions in the current budget, and received billions from individual well-wishers and private businesses and entities in Kenya. It is reasonable to expect a more robust, transparent, and humane response by the government. But that has not been the case. Instead, the pandemic seems to have opened floodgates for abuse of public finance and unreasonable flouting of procurement laws and abuse of supplementary budget for purposes that are not consistent with public interest.